The first road-going trams were pulled by horses. The horses worked around 15 miles a day, and each car needed about 11 horses to keep it going. The lifespan of a horse in tramcar service was about 4 years, poor things. This meant that in the 1800s there were an awful lot of horses sent to the local knacker's yard, and there were an awful lot of dead horses in effect. My grandmother was born in 1874 and she lived in the East End of London and ran what we affectionately called a cat's meat shop. Well, of course, cats had absolutely nothing to do with it. In modern parlance, you might have said she ran a pet shop, pet food shop. But what she traded in was horseflesh. A prime source of meat for Nanny's shop around 1900 was the knacker's yard down Three Colts Laneway near the East End of London. Portions or pieces of the slaughtered horses could be purchased at the yard, wheeled home, and then some of it at least was boiled up for sale in the shop. By all accounts, the smell of the knacker's yard and the smell of the pieces of horse meat, sometimes in Hessian sack, maybe sometimes not, had to be experienced to be believed. I'm happy to say that I never ever had that experience. My cousin, however, remembers being wheeled in the cart down to the knacker's yard and then sharing the cart on the way home with the pieces of extraordinarily smelly horseflesh. Some of the pieces of horse meat would be sold as was in the shop, but the pieces that weren't boiled apparently were painted green so that people knew that technically this meat was not fit for human consumption. The other bits that were boiled up were done in the backyard in the East End, and I understand resulted in not a few complaints from the neighbours about smell. The pieces of flesh would be cut up and sold as pet food primarily for dogs. And certainly I can remember as late as about 1960, quite a few of the police dog handlers in the East End would only feed their dogs on boiled up horseflesh. Of course, at that time, the knacker's yard was long out of business and horses were nowhere near as prevalent. And horseflesh used to be imported from Argentina, frozen, and then thawed out, cut up and boiled up to be sold to the police. At Christmas time, we would usually spend Christmas in the East End for the traditional knees up. And I do remember going with my uncle in his little grey van to deliver on Boxing Day the boiled up meat to a quite extensive round he had to various police houses and the like as food for their animals. Such were the times we lived in. The first steam-hauled road-going tramcars were open-topped, and that was a legacy of when they used to be pulled by horses. It rapidly became obvious that the exhaust emissions from the steam trams were a real problem to passengers on the open top of the early double-deckers. To improve travelling conditions for the upper deck passengers, the initial thoughts were to fit a steam condensing apparatus to the roof of the towing tram, the steam tram, in order to recycle some of the exhaust gases, etc., via the condenser, and thus improve matters for the passengers behind. The Wilkinson type steamer prime mover was popular to pull the tram cars because it was relatively small and of a relatively narrow width. That said, it still weighed around 12 tonnes, and some of them were much bigger. I think steam hauled trams started around 1882, something like that, and the Wilkinson trams mostly were built by Bayer Peacock, and they were vertical boilered jobs. There were horizontally boilered trams built by other manufacturers. A lot of the first cars were actually six-wheeled. They had a central axle, but they weren't very successful because points and bends, etc., caused a lot of problems and derailments, so they were rapidly phased out. Ultimately, steam-hauled trams were replaced by electric traction, and the bird's nests of overhead wires over the highways were a common feature, as was the man with the long pole reconnecting the electric conductor for the electric trams when they came off the wires. For reasons I can't explain, I've developed a bit of an affection for steam-hauled tram cars, and I've built a couple of open-topped versions of the cars for my garden railway. Today is Sunday the 20th of June 2021, and I'm gluing together this wooden Timpdon models kit of a tram to tow behind my roundhouse live steam prime mover tram. I never read instructions properly, so I've made a few mistakes, but I'm not owning up to any of that. The kit came with a set of four 3mm rods and some, I think that must be plastic, I don't think they're resin, plastic wheels to fit to the bogies. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with the as supplied wheels, except I just know from experience, if I fit those and try to run on my garden railway, there will be untold trouble, and the reason is my garden railway is so coarse. The very thin as supplied flanges, and also they're not very deep, if they don't fall off on the track when they get to my homemade points, there will be chaos. So I discovered in my box of bits that I bought, and I don't know why I bought them, actually a set of 6, I think it is, axles with preformed wheels, excellent quality, and I obviously got them from Slater's Plasticard, and I would guess I bought these things, and I don't remember when, I've had them a long time. I don't know why I bought them. I obviously had something in mind which I've long since forgotten, and I've suddenly found them in my box of bits, and I'm going to fit these axles in place of the Timpdon jobs, on the bogies. I'm sticking at the moment with the Timpdon bogie arrangement. Got reservations, but I'm doing that. And of course these have got slightly wider treads, but rather deeper and wider and more robust flanges on the wheels, which I know from bitter experience will cope much better with my uneven permanent way. To fit the Slater's wheels I have to make a few alterations. I had to widen the slots that came in the Timpdon kit for the bogies to give a bit more spacing, and I've also had to drill out, as supplied these with 3mm diameter holes, but they weren't deep enough to accept the stub ends of the Slater's wheels, and I didn't want to cut anything off the Slater's wheels, and there's plenty of meat left, so I've just had to deepen these a bit so they fit snugly on this axle up against the wheel. No big deal, but it has taken all morning. As an aside to sorting out these Timpdon bogies, I'm having a Butterfingers day, and I've had to find the things that I've dropped. I don't always bother. So in searching for the bits that I dropped, I've actually found a starred washer, no idea. I've found a 10BA hex bolt, don't know what that came from. I found a 10BA nut. I found a 5BA brass washer, and most interestingly I found a hex Allen key, all hidden in the mire under my bench. So I think I count that a win. A small health warning on the gluing together of the spiral pieces that make the risers and treads for the spiral staircases at each end of the tram car. Worth mentioning that I think it's important to check when you glue these bits together that the spirals are all going in the same direction. In this case, like that. I mean, you could, if you lose what you're doing, you could put it in like that, in which case the spiral will be setting off kind of the wrong way round and you'll get into a right muddle. They've all, in my view, they've all got to go the same way. We'll find out later on when we glue it to the tram. So important when you're laying it out to make sure you've got the things going off in the right spiral direction. And I think they're all the same, right end of the tram and the left. When I started this operation to glue these treads and risers together, I was using wood glue, but I'm too impatient. It was taking too long to go off, so I'm now gluing these bits using super glue, which obviously goes off quite quickly and you can handle them almost immediately. Timpdon kindly supply these numbered spacers which you use to prop up the steps at each end while the glue's drying. Really useful and a really good idea, so 12 out of 10 for that. One other little thing I did on this Timpdon tram, I can't bear bogies flying around through 360 degrees when you're putting it on the track, etc. So I've glued some bits of wood, just little stop blocks, so that the bogie lateral movement is controlled. More than enough to go around the bends, but just stops the thing going around 360, which just annoys me really. My Timpdon double-decker tram coach was painted kind of to match the livery of my roundhouse tram that's going to tow it. But having done that, I felt I had no option but to repaint my O'Shea ochre type tram from its original red livery to green to match my scratch built Wilkinson tram that's going to tow it. Talk about making work. Although I say it myself, I think the repainted ochre type tram in the green colour didn't come out too badly. In fact, I think it looks better than the as supplied red transfers that came with it. This is the Timpdon model kit open deck tram car undergoing its first test on my track, and I'm pleased to say it successfully negotiated everything without actually derailing or falling off. First test run with the re-liveried ochre tram, and I have to say that I'm actually very pleased with the appearance. I think it fits in well with the scratch built Wilkinson that's towing it. Grandma Jessie, who owned the cat's meat stroke horse meat shop referred to at the beginning of this video.